Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. This is Nick Shalom. Thanks so much for joining this next episode of In the Nick of Time. We're going to get started in about 12 minutes now. We're going to have a great episode today with our friend Nat coming from AccuKnox. He's going to be talking about all the innovation that's been going on with KubeArmor and AccuKnox and the Zero Trust runtime security that's been building and created with Phil for us at the Stanford Research Institute. So stay tuned. We're going to get started in about 12 minutes now. And if you have questions, make sure you start with a Q and put it in the comment section below. And also, if you want to share you here, put your name and company, and we can highlight you on the screen as well. Stay tuned. We're going to start with Naj in about 11 minutes. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. This is Nick Shalom. We're going to get started in this next episode of In the Nick of Time in about 8 minutes. Thanks so much for joining. Today, we have a great guest. Now, she's going to be talking about the great work they've been doing as part of the open source community and the CNCF with KubeArmor and what eBPF is. And also, you're going to find out why this is so critical for your runtime Kubernetes security. So make sure you get ready for your questions. If you don't know yet, the benefits of AppArmor, KubeArmor, SC Linux, and eBPF, you're going to find out more today. Stay tuned. We're going to get started about 7 minutes. In the meantime, if you want to subscribe to our YouTube channel, go check out one of our videos on chaos engineering or GitOps. Do that at youtube.com/Nicolas Chelon. And finally, if you want to share you here, put your name and your company so we can highlight you on the comment section on the screen. So stay tuned. We're going to get started in about 7 minutes. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. This is Nick Shalom. We're going to get started in about a couple of minutes. Thanks so much for joining us in the next episode with Nat today, the CEO and co-founder of AccuKnox. We're going to be talking about a lot of great new technologies around Kubernetes and security and runtime security with eBPF. And you may not know what it is yet, and you're going to find out why it matters. We're also going to talk about KubeArmor with SE Linux and AppArmor as part of the CNCF Foundation. So stay tuned. If you have questions, make sure you ask them in the comment section below. And if you want to just share you here, put your name and company. We can highlight you on the screen as well. Stay tuned. A couple of minutes, we'll get started. And it's going to be a fun time. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. This is Nick Shalom. Thanks so much for joining us in the next episode of In the Nick of Time. Today, I'm pretty excited. We're going to have a technical episode. We didn't have a technical episode in the show in quite some time, so I think it's going to be pretty interesting. If you want to learn more about Kubernetes security, runtime security, things like KubeArmor and eBPF and why they matter and why are they essential to your cyber defense. So we're going to talk today with a great guest, a great expert in the domain, involved directly with the CNCF community on the KubeArmor project. So we'll dig into that in a minute. But as always, make sure that you take a look at the latest videos that we have posted on YouTube. If you've missed it, we just released about a few days ago a video on chaos engineering and why chaos matters, particularly for weapon systems, but pretty much for any production system, and the principles of chaos. So check out that video on YouTube. Also, subscribe to the youtube.com/Nicolas Chillon channel so you can get notifications for our next videos. We're going to be publishing 45 segments covering everything between culture and actual deep dive technical deep dives, and also acquisition related training, so you can really understand what it takes to move to that digital transformation mindset, and what are the critical pieces to understand, including specifically for non-technical people, so they understand better why all this matters and why they should pay attention to all of this stuff. So check out those videos. And like I said, we have a full segment coming out in August. That's going to be pretty cool stuff. Finally, make sure you subscribe to our mailing list so you can get notification about the different live episodes by going to the inthenickofTime.tv. All right, so first, before bringing Nat today on the screen, first, I wanted to bring up a little bit of his background so you know who he is. Like I told you, he's a world expert in cyber. Is today the co-founder and CEO of AccuKnox. And AccuKnox is the zero trust runtime security company that was founded in partnership with the Stanford Research Institute. They have quite a bunch of patents, 15 patents, when it comes to identity-based zero trust microsegmentation, AI, and unsupervised based anomaly detection, and of course data security as well. Before that, Nat was he co-founded also Alcavio, the leader in deception technology with honeypots on steroids, that was in partnership with DHS and CMS and Verizon and Honeywell. And before that, he was the EVP of worldwide operations at Arca Technology, one of the leader in an early leader really of two-factor authentication back then, with federated authentication that was acquired by CA Technologies for $200 million back in 2010. He has a MS in engineering from the University of Virginia and a BS in engineering from Bombay, and is now based in the Silicon Valley. So let's bring Nat on the screen in a second. Hi, how are you doing this morning?
I'm very well. Thank you, Nick. How are you? You look
very good.
You got an amazing background. And that's
it's all fake. It's all fake, but it works, but love DC, and people always say, oh, it's Paris. I'm like, Americans tell me it's Paris all the time. I'm like, you don't recognize the Lincoln Memorial behind me? That's okay. So anyway,
we live in a meta world, right? Meta world. We live
yeah, wanted to thank you first for joining the show. We have so many people already ask a bunch of questions. And, we're going to cover some pretty deep technical subjects. Not everyone is technical. So my goal is to make sure we bring it to them in a way that they understand, so we don't lose half of the audience. But first, as we always start, I love to get a little bit of your journey. And so that's my first ask to you is give us a little bit of a background as to how you got there, how you acquired all this deep expertise, and how you get engaged, with Stanford to really do this joint engagement, and why this came to be.
Absolutely, Nick. How would you and the audience like it? Would you like it reverse chronological or chronological? Or
yeah, whatever. I guess start maybe from the beginning, when you were 1 year old.
I was born in a log cabin with no running water.
See, that's a good, and by the way, that demonstrates kind of the fact that, hard work and real, expertise and hard work can let you succeed in everything, that despite wherever you started. And now you're in Silicon Valley in California.
Like you, like almost everybody on this call, in the tech field, the cyber field, you pretty much start as a techie, right? You start writing code. After my master's from University of Virginia, not very far from where you live, Nick, in Charlottesville.
Yeah.
Started writing code for very coincidentally a French company called Alcatel in Washington, D.C. And first was part of their medical imaging division, a lot of code and embedded image processing and the like. Then their telecom division, a lot of signal processing and the like. And then moved to the business side, but have been modestly technical. So have spanned like most of us, right? The generation of client server, then the first generation cloud, just nothing more than say Netscape browser and Netscape server and the like. And then now we are living in this amazing world, modern world of microservices, public cloud, hybrid cloud, and everything in between. In that journey, right, for the last 10 years, I have been in 15 years almost in security. Starting from what are the easiest problem you solve, right? It's a problem of two-factor authentication. That's really where I cut my teeth and got my security chops, if you will.
It's the
And
easiest problem, but most people still don't do it. So they should really take it seriously. But yes, absolutely.
and that was an amazing journey at Arcad. We worked with the truly industry gurus, right? Martin Hellman, the inventor of public key cryptography, and Tahir El Gamal, of the El Gamal, Diffie El Gamal. So there's some amazing people.
You
And
can't tub that. You can't tub that.
yeah, exactly. So the public key cryptography is, I think I always tell people the easiest software to use in the world, security software, to me is the SSL library, right? What they did an amazing job of is abstracting all the PKI complexity, digital signature, signing, and authentication, reputation, all that, right? So that's the world we came from, and these are the days when multi-factor authentication really was what was needed. Then came risk-based authentication, then came federated authentication. Worked with MasterCard, Visa to build out their 3D Secure program, which is one of the largest federated authentication program. So that was an amazing journey, and that was a nice exit. CA SiteMinder was an amazing IDM and IAM platform, and they found that is a classic burger and fries, right? It's a great way to the last mile security is what we provided. We had a partnership with them, and that partnership really flourished. And a lot of these partnerships remain a partnership, and they move to the next step, which is a merger, and that's what happened. And that's an amazing division. At that time, we were probably again plus minus 20-30 million dollars. Now we are well north of 150 million dollars. So it's a great way to sort of take two amazing technologies and bring together amazing value, and at the end of the day, customer benefits, shareholder benefits, employee benefit, right? So that was a nice journey. And
CA then got bought by Broadcom. I know VMware is getting bought by Broadcom, so it's
I
kind
know,
of
I know, no comments there, right? Yeah,
Yep.
be careful.
Yeah, I know. Yep.
And AccuKnox was a very interesting journey because my co-founder, Asif Ali, I've known Asif for the last 15 years, great techie. Again, he'd done a number of large-scale cloud architecture, modernization. This was about 4 years ago, lift and shift from data centers, service data centers to, rack space data centers to the cloud, go from first generation cloud migration to everybody wants to get to the cloud. Then they realize that, hey, it's costing me 2x more. And duh, you should have known that, right? So then, because it's like going from a large house to an apartment, right? You have sort of worst of both, right? So then
Right.
people say, yeah, what do I do now? So a lot of these CIOs, CISOs consulted with Asif and say, okay, now I have to think about microservices. Do I do Docker? Do I do container? Do I do mesos? Do I do Kubernetes? Do I go jump all of that, go to serverless and everything in between, right? And so he helped a number of CIOs in Silicon Valley with this cloud transformation. After about 12, 18 months, one CIO of a very large company said, hey, you've done a great job of taking me through the Kubernetes journey, microservices journey. Now, how do I know it's secure? So that was sort of the aha, moment. And that's when he came to me. His background is more DevOps, more cloud architecture and microservices. He came, and because of my security background, we started ideating, right? And that's when we spent a couple of weekends. We said, Kubernetes is very, very ephemeral, very transient, and these are public information, right? Tesla had a big a breach. There were a number of companies in the Kubernetes journey which had a breach, and just the scale volume is massive, right? Again, these are public numbers. Netflix spends up and down 175,000 containers a day, right? So the simple things like IP tables, C groups, which we all know how to do, sort of breaks apart at this scale, volume, the level of ephemerality, right? So that's when he came to me, and that's when we started ideating, right? So that was the start of a journey, and we said, okay, let's start with a clean slate, right? What is a clean slate? You obviously IP addresses don't work, so you need identity as a perimeter. Again, this was not our brilliance, right? Other people had tried it, right? But to do it nice and clean, you end up building your own PKI, and that's a thankless journey, right? Nobody, either very smart or very stupid, should do that, right? So
Nobody wants that. Yeah.
yes, yeah, and so that when we said, luckily for us, that's about the time Google had spun out a project called Spiffy. So we said,
Yep.
this is brilliant. This takes away all the kind of headache and the rigmarole of managing identities, right? Not just the user identity is a very simpler one, right? Which is what Okta and other people are focused at. The service identities were the next, the harder problem. And previous generation people who tried to implement identity as a perimeter struggled and spent 10, 20, $30 million of VC funding, right? So we said, this is fantastic. We can take Spiffy project, which around that time had been spun out as a separate company, Cytail, which then later got acquired by HPE, which is an amazing CNCF project. And we talked to a number of large companies, right? And they were all adopting. So we said, this is a great building block for us to build out of, right? Then around the same time, eBPF had come about. So what we said is there are some very fundamental building blocks available. So you don't have to, it's like building a house. Building a house is hard business, but starting a plumbing factory is harder, right? Starting a concrete factory is harder. So we said these are all things which are available, and that sort of formed the basis. And let me pause, ask you any questions before I take you
No,
to
this is great.
next generation.
And I guess I kind of cut it in a, you kind of did a great job summarizing the journey. I cut it into simple bites for the audience to be able to keep tracking what we're saying. The first piece, I think would be great for people to understand is kind of what is KubeArmor, the CNCF journey. What does it do? What's all the benefits, right? You talk about Spiffy and Spire, but now let's talk a little bit about KubeArmor.
Absolutely. Yeah, KubeArmor was a very interesting project. So the way the company got about was we went to Stanford Research Institute. Phil Porras is a very top flight cybersecurity architect, and we started ideating. And then we said there are three broad and the basic technologies you need, right? You need, how do you implement container level security at scale in an easy way? You need to solve that problem. Second is, that's fine and dandy. What happens if there's any anomaly, any deviation, any kind of drift? So you need some anomaly detection, some AI unsupervised learning based thing. And the third key technology building block you need is data. At the end of the day, data is the new oil. So how do you create data firewalls? How do you protect the data? This is when GDPR was getting very big, CCPA was getting big. So those are the key building blocks, right? Then we said the consumption model of enterprise software has also changed a lot, right? Since the time, Nick, you and I sort of have been around a few years. In the good old days, you had amazing technologies built by large enterprise companies. It pretty much was top down, CISO down, CIO down, right? Today, just because of the proliferation of the technologies and the complexity of the technologies and the sophistication and the change and CNCF and open source building some amazing technology, the consumption model has also changed, right? Which means that it's becoming much, much more a bottoms-up consumption model. Security architect, security engineer, DevSecOps consumption model. So we said, anything we build has to be we have to think about open source first as a way of consumption. And KubeArmor was, again, a very interesting thing because SecComp, SE Linux, AppArmor, these are amazing technologies which were developed either by DoD or in conjunction with DoD projects, which were really a great way for you to harden Linux, right?
Yep.
So, and those technologies were hard. And when we talked to people, we said a lot of people were almost afraid of playing around with it because it was very, very hard, right?
Yeah, you don't want to mess it up.
Yeah,
and it's
exactly.
also like it's dependent on the Linux distribution. So if you're moving between, Ubuntu and RHEL, you're gonna have
Precisely,
completely different ways of doing it. Yeah.
precisely. So, and we said, that you have to have the same hardening technologies applied at the container level, at the
Right.
pod level, right? So that's when we said, rather than reinvent something new, let's take the same concepts
And
and
apply.
apply it at the pod level. So that was, and then we, again, the good news about us is we are very big about getting market validation, right? We can sit and drink our Kool-Aid and sit in an ivory tower, but we said, let's quickly.
No, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So between the few, the hyperscalers in Silicon Valley, a few very large money center banks on the East Coast and Washington, D.C., DoD agency, they said, this is fantastic. This is exactly what we want. And that sort of was the foundation of KubeArmor, right? KubeArmor is all about providing the same level of hardening of the technologies, which has been around for a long time, like AppArmor, SE Linux, KSRI. And how do you apply in the Kubernetes securities policies and apply them to in a LSNs? At the same
Right.
time, you want the eBPF. eBPF is another great technology, and
Yeah. Wait a bit on the eBPF because that's going to be another whole deep dive. But
yes,
just
yes,
to
yeah.
just for people, right, that may
Absolutely,
not know.
absolutely. So what we said is we want to idiot proof it, right? The thing of,
Right.
again, we tend to, in our own world, tend to complicate it. Yes, the technologies have to be, obviously these are not trivial technologies, so they have to be sophisticated, but we have to simplify it so much that it becomes sort of an A: install. It never will be that, but we want to make it as simple as possible so that it's consumable.
And
So
it's open source and part of the CNCF, right?
Correct. Exactly. That was, again, so we presented to the CNCF Policy Management Committee, and immediately that was like almost eureka, right? They said, this is fantastic. We want to sponsor. Luckily, a couple of large organizations also lent support. That always makes a big difference. It's not just about vendor tooting our own horn, but a couple of large people saying, yes, this will fall behind it. And the rest is, it's been a very great consumption model. We are up to over 170,000 users right now, and it has been a great journey. And so what we really focused on is the complexity is good because you can deliver robust security, but you need to, again, simplify it so that it's consumable.
Right.
That's really what we focused on. Yeah.
Yeah. So, let's see if I can summarize some of the stuff you said to see if the audience, agrees with whatever I'm saying. Okay. So I guess KubeArmor is kind of an abstraction layer, so you don't have to be boggled down to the AppArmor SE Linux level. So for people that don't know, in fact, Beauty has mandated in the Kubernetes hardening guide and the STIG the use of AppArmor and SE Linux to be able to not only secure the container level in the pod, but also the node. And that's the beauty of also, of course, of KubeArmor. It's able to effectively use the Linux security modules, right, to be able to enforce certain security principles across and agnostic to the type of node or the type of operating system you're using. And it's able to do pretty deep behavior, such as, the process execution enforcement, the file access enforcement, the networking access. So it's really covering not just the networking piece, but also the access to files and processes. And it's able to do it both at the container and the node level. And some example of I guess, I think people like always a couple of good example. you could restrict the behavior of containers at the system level, but you can also enforce security policies in runtime and kind of produce container alerts with system logs and really kind of streamlining that semantic, right? So you don't have to do it per operating system. So that gives you the same enforcement across your entire stack, no matter what kind of Linux distribution you're using. And of course, all that was made open source and part of the Cloud Native Computing Foundation. Did I get it right?
Absolutely, absolutely right. And we're adding other things such as file integrity monitoring, all of that to make it really kind of robust and full stack. Yeah.
Yeah, so we got KubeArmor. Now, a lot of people are saying to talk about eBPF, and a lot of people, honestly, are getting a little bit confused. And I have to say, maybe it is confusing between kind of the differences or the benefits or the play there is between eBPF and Service Mesh. We had here on the show, of course, the Easter guys, so they told us about the mesh before. But tell us a little bit about what eBPF is.
eBPF is the easiest way to think about eBPF and Cilium is they really make your kernel programmable, right? So if you think about, what did JavaScript do? JavaScript, most people thought it was a flaky language, not really for real computer scientists. But the brilliance about JavaScript was it made your browser programmable, right? So what used to be like simple, if you go to Yahoo screen or AOL screen 15 years ago, which looked pretty much like an IBM Selectric typewriter, right? So, and today it made it unbelievably programmable, right? So you didn't need enormous graphic artists and programmers to make it, Adobe Flash, all that sort of silly technologies which came about, right? So what this made similar to that, right? To make the kernel programmable is a very hard problem because, one, you're running in the kernel space, which is really a very sort of the inner side.
You don't want to mess that one up.
Exactly. So how do you do it? And that really was the brilliance of eBPF, right? It added a level of programmability in a very safe and an extremely
secure way. And it's your just-in-time compiler, right? So that's natively compiled, and so it's very fast, right?
Yeah. And obviously the limits to what you can do. You cannot write re-entrant code and things like that. But that's enough for you to do lots of things. What do you want to do? You want to observe, right? And as we all know, Audit D was such a sort of poor, slow as molasses, right? So if you want to do really fast and furious observability and enforcement and traceability, right?
Tracing, yeah.
eBPF is eBPF, and the rest is history, as they say.
You can
right?
touch networking. You can touch networking too, and the whole security apparatus of the kernel.
Correct. And if you look at the Facebook's load balancer Catran is based on this eBPF, right? If you look at Cloudflare CDN is based on eBPF. So this is not sort of some casual sort of hippie project. And now eBPF Foundation has come about. This is really a broad industry between Microsoft and Google and Facebook and Netflix behind it, right? And ISO behind it. So you have great community support. And so what we're doing is, like a lot of people initially said, hey, if you secure the network, you're really securing the application, which, as we all know, is far from true, right? So while other people were focusing on securing the network, we said, let's focus on application and data. At the end of the day, that really is the crown jewel, right? So that's what we focused on. And obviously, do it in the way the performance. Netflix was a big part of our, what we call design customer or design partner, and they have a mandate that security is great, but it cannot consume more than 5% of assets, IT assets, right? That's network, CPU, this thing. So if you have to keep it within that, you've got to be not only sophisticated, you also have to be clever and efficient, right?
Yeah, and lean, yeah, no doubt. So you did mention it for a second, but there's this kind of Cilium, right, open source also project that kind of encapsulate eBPF to make it kind of a whole container, security stack, right? That effectively use eBPF to implement it, to observe, and it does effectively kind of pretty much what a sidecar envoy proxy in a service mesh would be doing, except right is doing it using the kernel, and so effectively, some people say it's 20 plus percent faster.
Yes. Yeah. I would say
That's the big.
yeah. I would say it's even faster
That's
than
the
that.
big difference, right?
Correct.
That's so effectively, I guess you get some of the same benefits, right, of what a service mesh can do, but you also get maybe a deeper access to what the kernel
Absolutely.
can watch and kind of enforce, right? So you could effectively do that more natively and faster.
Correct.
But I guess, do you see a use case? And that's a question I always get is okay, but if I already have a service mesh, or if I already use a service mesh, or if I'm planning on using a mesh, is there a use case where you see benefits in using both, an eBPF security layer and a mesh with Envoy, for example?
Absolutely. For multiple reasons, right? So one is performance. Second is deep kernel observability, and the other
Mm-hmm.
thing which we offer over and beyond a lot of people, other people vendors, is runtime enforcement, right? So
Right.
it's not just about watching the traffic and observability, but compared to other projects,
Prevention.
to CNI projects, right? We can do
Mm-hmm.
inline observability and enforcement. So it's rather
Enforcement.
than being asynchronous, we can be very, very
So it could be
synchronous.
a preventive.
Correct.
It could be a preventive layer. But
Correct.
do you think of it as potentially in the future replacing the mesh? Do
No,
you
no.
see them redundant?
I think coexistence would be the right thing for most people. If performance is
Mm-hmm.
not an issue, if you just want simple WAF L7, security, then service mesh will do just fine, right? But if you
Mm-hmm.
want deep kernel observability, L3, L4, L7, and if you want performance, I'm talking about telcos, IoT, 5G,
Right.
edge, and so those kinds of. There's clearly a class of applications.
Or maybe embedded system that have limited, so it would be pretty relevant to the
Correct.
DoD, right? Because they would have
Correct.
limited hardware. In
Correct.
fact, the next episode on the show, we're gonna have the people joining from the embedded system side of the house, and they're gonna
Oh,
tell us
very good.
about
I would,
the challenges
I
between
would look forward to that. I would look forward to that.
between software and hardware, and decoupling the software and running on very limited
Yeah,
hardware with non Intel chips, and so there's a lot of complexity there.
correct.
So performance is obviously critical, particularly when you have limited compute and memory.
Correct.
So we talked about KubeArmor, right, which gives you kind of the SC Linux AppArmor
Yes,
abstracted layer, so you can add a drastic level of security both to your nodes, the virtual machines, and to the container. Then we talk
yeah,
about eBPF, going down to the kernel level, to kind of use just-in-time compilation to create maybe customized set of hooks and things to enforce, whether it's file using file management, storage, or network things,
yes,
sockets, TCP/IP, whatever level you're doing it. Like you said, that gives you a deeper access to the lower level, right? So the
yes.
mesh is more focused on layer 7. That would give you all of the above, right? So that's kind of the beauty there. So now we got the basics of this. You talked about CDM a little bit, but how did you see CDM play into this, and what are they bringing to the table, I guess?
I mean, like Cilium is they one is maintaining the community, which is a big thing,
Yep.
and they clearly are solving an important problem and the hard problem, which is network security, which is a big
Mm-hmm.
one. Again, as I'm sure you know, a number of them come from Nisira, the whole Nisira background, so they understand that problem very well. We are at the application level, we are at the data level, so we are at a higher level of abstraction where they support the foundational elements, right? So
Right. And they're also a CNCF project, right?
absolutely.
Yeah.
So
Incubation project.
we are core contributors to Spiffy. We are core contributors to Cilium, in addition to our own contribution, KubeArmor. Right? So we're big believers
Right.
in both consuming from the ecosystem, contributing back to the ecosystem, and adding sufficient value.
Right. So it gives you a lot of layer of security, and you kind of came up with this additional layer in your product, which is kind of this policy template
Yes.
concept. And obviously, policy as code is so important for DoD and moving to GitOps and faster as code. So tell us a little bit about what is this kind of policy template concept that you're
Yeah,
building.
that's the thing is, if you want to, first is observability, right? Like, as I say, you
Mm-hmm.
cannot secure what you don't see, right? So first is to observe what is going on, and based on once you observe, then you want to come up with policies which are essentially policy as code for
Mm-hmm.
lateral movement, for credential access, for execution, for all of that, you want not just policies which are applicable to your operation, also based on what infrastructure software you're using. Like, for example,
Mm-hmm.
stick policies, right? You want to come up with policies which can easily be implemented, as opposed to requiring huge lines of, what are the policies you need to employ to get MITRE compliance, NIST compliance, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we said, we really want to work on that. The more value we add in getting customers to, first is observability, right? We were quite amazed at how little was available, right? In a very
Right.
crisp, in a very succinct way, at multiple levels of abstraction, right? So
Mm-hmm.
while security was the core, obviously that's our sort of bailiwick, if you will, but it became very clear that we had to provide observability at some level of detail, even before
Mm-hmm.
we were ready for security. So that was, and once you observe, then you can come up with policies. Some policies which are you recommend in terms of higher level of abstract, like a
Mm-hmm.
PCI SAS 70, CCPA, GDPR, HIPAA, as the case might be, and others are more sort of granular, where you let people, like Log4j as an example, right? You see an emerging threat, and you want to come up with a policy to mitigate that, right? So
Right. So effectively, you're providing templates of YAML, right, that people can reuse to enforce different
correct,
kind of use cases, and you kind of made that policy template
correct,
available on GitHub, and people can just go and say, hey, okay, I want to reuse this STIG, MySQL, or
correct,
Postgres, or
correct,
Python, or maybe some malware enforcement too. I saw and Elastic and
correct,
Golang and Java, and so
correct.
so you're enforcing different kind of things. It's not just network stuff. It could be. I know you have a Spring for Shell
Yes,
mitigation, for example, to prevent the running of the Java Spring for
correct,
Shell
correct.
CV, right?
Correct, and give people, again, YAML might be, people comfortable technically might be very comfortable with YAML, you and I, right? Whereas other people are looking at the higher levels of abstraction. Just don't, YAML is too detailed, too granular for me. So we want to
Yeah.
give people sort of visibility and enforceability and auditability at multiple levels, right? Which is really why we have the enterprise product AccuKnox, right? So whereas
Mm-hmm.
KubeArmor is great for pure cloud native practitioners, at a higher level, people, you need policy versioning, right? You need policy clustering. You need lots and lots of dashboards, lots and lots of reports. So you need, so those kinds of things. The higher, what I call creature comforts, right? Which you need
Right.
at a higher level. If you're running a compliance, HIPAA compliance, right? That person really should not worry about YAML templates, right? That's at the security
Right.
engineer level, right? Mhm.
Yeah, that's too much in the weeds. And the beauty of these is, a lot of people are used to, I guess, signatures in the DoD side with web application firewalls, for example, but those are pretty limited, right, in terms of what they can do in terms of enforcement. Obviously, usually focus on the networking side, but in this case, right, the beauty there of the template is I've seen some that literally focus on the file access, or accessing system calls on the Linux kernel that are more non-related to the networking side, and so you could prevent pretty much all kind of CVEs, assuming you have the right policy, right?
Correct. And if you look at every aspect of MITRE TTP, it's all about being able to correlate some events in tandem and coming up with sort of a security construct on top of it, or compliance construct on top of it, right? So,
Yeah, and what I've seen also that was pretty cool was the you have one policy, for example. I'm going to put the link on the chat here so people can can check it out. But you have a bunch of policies also on some CVs that are really related to in this use case a CV that's impacting the Linux command sudo, and so you're effectively preventing that privilege escalation of a CV from 2019. And so by having kind of these reusable templates, right, people can simply keep up with those and update them and have that already baked into their business, and so they don't have to worry about this stuff. It's already handled at a lower level, and it's not something that people always go back to a WAF and what a WAF could do, but it's way more precise and granular than a WAF.
Correct. And that's precisely
so for people that want to check it out, this is just a good example of this here, the CV that's impacting sudo from 2019. There's hundreds, obviously, that you have there, but I think this one is interesting because it's not a networking. It's not like you're trying to pulse or look at the HTML or the HTTP post data being sent to the network, looking at injections or something like that. It's literally preventing the system from running a specific Linux commands. So that's the next level enforcement that I don't know of anything that will let you do that without it. You could think of hundreds of enforcement layers at the networking layer, right? And many companies, from the F5 of the world to the Service Mesh to the Palo Alto of the world, and the cloud providers even, right, have a pretty good grasp of WAFs, right? But I don't think there's anything that gives you kind of configuration as code policy enforcement layers that would be able to be enforced not just on the networking side, but also on the entire syscall Linux kernel side. That's pretty cool, right?
And we've been super happy with the feedback we've been getting from large customers, right? Large customers who really, they may not be cloud native in the sense of Apple, Google, Facebook, but they really want to be, or they've got divisions which are really getting them towards the Kubernetes platform, and they all want to not only consume these policies, they want to develop new policies and contribute it back, right? So the power of the open source community has been spectacular, even more than my wildest dreams, if you will, right?
Yeah, so that's going to lead me to, okay, you created all this good stuff. There was a lot of contributions to CNCF open source, and obviously a lot of companies struggling to monetize and make it a business. Often they end up creating a lot of custom IP and so how do you, why initially did you think, hey, okay, we should really go and create AccuKnox and make it a business?
That's a great question. It's something, Nick, as you can imagine, we get this question not just from you, but also our investors, right?
Yeah, sure. That's a good question for an investor, no doubt.
Yeah, because they've seen way too many sort of open source projects which focus on goodness and grace and just nice thing, very, but it's hard to make a commercial business out of it. That's where from very, very early on, we were very, very clear, right? We want to give enough value to the community over and beyond what we consume. But at the end of the day, be very clear from a sort of a top-down, CIO, CISO down, right? Which means that everything which they have to run an operation in production, right? Which means discovery, policy templates, clustering, anomaly detection, reports, dashboards, SaaS operation, right? Support for multi-cloud, support for hybrid cloud, support for not just Kubernetes. And we in our own cloud native world, we think the world starts and ends with Kubernetes, but you'd be amazed at very different flavors of virtual machines and bare metals, which the organizations are dealing with, right? How do you deal with that? So we really have to provide enough value for
support all that stuff. Yeah.
So if you're pure cloud native, right? Then you'll be, and if you got enough smarts and techies to deal with the with YAML and all that, then you'll be fine with our KubeArmor open source project. And you should be. Again, the goal is not to give you sort of
the goal is not to get you have
yeah.
baked locked in, and then
Exactly.
you have to pay
The goal is,
the real
hey,
stuff.
if you're super, the example which I use, which is, I don't know if it's applicable or not, is like if you're a tinkerer, if you're an auto techie tinkerer, right? You're perfectly fine with taking a bank of batteries from Tesla and a bunch of DC induction motors, and you say, hey, I can build a car. Great. Go
I
have
can't
it.
do that. I promise. So
I
I'll
know
just
that you
buy.
want to, but whereas we need a full-fledged Tesla with all the creature comfort, right? Which is fine. So we want to certainly make a commercial business out of that customer segment. But
Yeah,
the
you
same
use streamlining and making it easy to consume.
exactly. But you'd be amazed that we have one large telco customer. We're still doing a POC with them, and they want to consume only our open source project, but they're saying, hey, this is for their managed IoT business. They're saying that, and they want to add a security kernel on top of that. And they're saying, hey, I'm liable for 24/7 support to my customers. Their customers are large 1,800 grocery stores where they manage all the IoT devices, airports, right, where they manage all the IoT devices. They say, hey, we have a 24/7 SLA with our clients. And obviously, we don't want to go out on a limb with a pure open source project. So we want full support behind it. You'd be amazed at
They
what
just don't want closed IP. They don't want closed IP, but they want the support.
Exactly. Because as I'm sure freemium is not freemium, right? So really, you want the power of the community,
Yeah.
where you got the cloud natives and the large sort of Washington D.C., New York based large enterprises contributing to it, right?
Yeah. So this is the why. So now let's look into a little bit of the value behind it, right? We talked about all this tech stuff, right? Most people understand, okay, you're gonna add layers of security to prevent malicious actors from doing different things, and mitigate both the blast radius, but also the ability to laterally move across the network. And it goes back, of course, to zero trust and that enforcement. But how important for you, when you talk to companies and CIOs and CISOs, right? How important is that runtime security and zero trust enforcement for that successful cyber posture compared to just like pipe? Most people are focused on CI/CD pipeline, one time, or like pipeline security checkpoints, but this is way more powerful in runtime.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's a great question, Nick, because clearly, two things, right? I don't think people even understood or even appreciated, leave alone even know that runtime was an issue till SolarWinds hit.
Right. That's a perfect example of saying, hey, you couldn't have detected this during the pipeline checks.
Exactly. It's all your typical cloud posture management, typical static container scanning.
It's signed bits from the vendor. You get the bits. You don't know how malicious it is.
Exactly.
So you have to take that risk.
It's a good old problem of antivirus, right? Antivirus has worked extremely well till they stopped working, right? When the attacks became sophisticated, when it became multi-stage attacks. So similar to that, right? Does everybody need it? No. But somebody who's security conscious, somebody who's gone well past their static defenses, right? Yeah. Do you need posture management? Yes. Do you need vulnerability management, container scanning? Yes, you need that, right? But once you're done with that, exactly.
That's actually how we prevent, lateral movement in the DoD, right? We came to the conclusion after SolarWinds and many other events that effectively you cannot detect malicious code in nature. Most of the scanners are detecting bad code, but not malicious code. So that's how we enforce it through runtime security, right?
Exactly. So is that the first thing you do? No. But it very quickly is immediately after the first thing you do, there's the second thing you do, right?
It's the second, yeah. It's interesting, right? Because obviously the static code analysis stuff and all the the scanning, the basic scanning stuff is pretty common now. But at the same time, the volume of false positives and the volume of issue you see coming, particularly when you have bits coming both from open source and from commercial vendors, it's you don't know what to do, right? Because okay, you're gonna scan some software like Atlassian, you're gonna find 1,400 CVEs on Jira. What are you gonna do?
Yes.
Well, that's where you put it behind zero trust, and you have that runtime piece, and right. You could not do it. I mean, I would argue, okay, that's probably the second thing you do in terms of maturity, but I would argue you're not secure until you do it.
Correct, correct. And zero trust is very easy to talk about. It is very fashionable in cocktail parties, right? But if you apply zero trust in a brute force way, you're going to block everything, right? So
Yeah.
you need an intelligent way
Yeah,
to
it has to be something that
whitelist,
doesn't,
right?
because it's very easy to be secure if you destroy velocity and speed
Exactly,
and
exactly.
everything, right?
So what we really provide you is that fine balance, right? Between, yes, you need zero trust, but how do you make it simple? How do you whitelist policies? You discover policies. How do you know what is good and what is bad and what is sort of in between, right? Because it's not as much a black and white as you see. So we give you several sort of fine-grained controls, right? You
Right,
can put policies in audit mode, right? Typically in development, you want to put an audit mode, and we
right.
say what's going on, and then you can put an enforcement mode, right? So
Right. First,
that
you let it learn, and then you enforce
exactly,
it.
exactly. Because
Yeah.
unless you're running sort of a very Stalinist operation, you cannot just be brute force about it. Right? You got to be a lot
Right.
more business savvy
That's why
and
people always had a great question for me for all this kind of situation where you're learning and you may be learning the bad behavior, right? People tell me,
correct.
well, what if you're teaching the system on the already vulnerable, SolarWinds stack, and
Yes,
that's just something that there's not much
exactly,
solution there,
exactly,
right?
exactly.
It's just what are you gonna do? But the
Yeah.
beauty also with zero trust is you have to whitelist the egress of data, right, to leave the
Yes.
cluster, and so that you would need to say, yeah, I'm okay, exfilling, all that data. And some people did it because they thought, SolarWinds was sending updates back to their server, when it wasn't going to their server, it was going to a command and control system. But that's why it's so important to also know like ingress, egress, and most companies should be mandated to provide kind of all of the ingress, egress, and point and protocol traffic coming in and
Correct.
out of their SaaS or their cost products. It's kind of mind boggling that I help a lot of companies get accredited in DoD, and I ask them, okay, show me the architecture of your stack and where it's running, what kind of APIs you're using, third party services, SaaS, and other things. And most of them don't have the list. They don't even know what they consume, and they don't know
Right.
where the data is flowing and how it's flowing and what kind of protocol it's using and is it encrypted or not, and who are they talking to. And oh, I'm using this SaaS service from Okta. Well, they were breached for 4 months and they didn't tell their customer for 4 months. But it's okay because it was only 2.5% of the customer. Well, if you're in the 2.5%, you would care, right? So it's always
You're 100%. You're 100%
right.
breached.
It's just interesting how when you pick a SaaS service, right? A lot of people start to say, well, that's not my problem anymore, right? I'm giving that capability to a third party, but it's still your data is still the I mean, particularly if you outsource identity management, which is something I would never do on the multi-tenant SaaS service, because I think
Correct.
it's just too big of a crown jewel to let it be hosted outside of my clusters. But if when you think about a few key things like that, right? I mean, I'm okay using Twilio to send text, right? But I'm probably
Yes.
not okay outsourcing ICAM and maybe probably not my policy enforcement point for zero trust. So when you describe to your customers, because when we started, and I pushed zero trust 6 years ago, with Google and DHS, and we pushed software defined perimeter and all this concept. And now it's back then everybody was fighting me, telling me I was crazy to move away from the perimeter model, and now everyone is suddenly in love with it, right? But when you look back and you look at zero trust and you go explain to people now, because if you look at every website to any cyber companies on the planet, they tell you that they're implementing zero trust and it's a magical silver
Yes.
bullet. How do you even define zero trust to your client? What when you if you have to describe it to my dead grandma, well, how would you describe zero trust?
No, no, I think zero trust is a lot simpler than people make it. Obviously, John Kinderwag. I mean, but we should realize the zero trust as a concept is
Right.
not a new concept, right? It's go back
No.
to 30 years, right? If you go by the Multics project, right?
Right.
Multics project, if my memory serves me right, is the first time which talked about least privilege. Right? So
Yes.
this is all a continuation from the least privilege, right?
Yeah. Need to know this,
And
brother. Yeah.
yeah, so I think John Kinderwag deserves a lot of credit for coming up with a crystal. It's like like
Yeah. Crystal clear.
yeah,
Yeah.
8 steps of weight loss. People buy the book, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So he did a great
That's it.
job of one coming up with a good, least privilege is sort of interesting, but I don't think it's a catchy marketing term, right? Zero trust is a great marketing term. So
Marketing matters, right?
yeah, you got to give
That's how you
Kinderwag a lot of
sell.
credit for
You
that.
get people
And then he
excited about the
simplified
stuff.
it. Once he simplified it, he said, you know what, deny all. Assume that you have been breached or you will be breached. So by definition,
Right.
deny. Then the deny all is the easy part, right?
Right.
Then comes what are you going to allow, right? And what are
Right.
you going to allow, and based on what? Based on
Based
either
on what?
risk or observation of what's going on, and then that's a great place to start. But still, kind of trust but verify, right? How do you do
Right.
ongoing as the great
That's always what's confusing to my dead grandma, right? There is some level of trust because we say it's zero trust, but that's not exactly true, right?
no,
Because
no,
at
no.
some
You,
point
you,
you
you
have to
you have to
decide what
trust
you trust
something, right? And
and how you trust it. And usually it's a runtime basis. The way we did it in DoD, right? We check the device state to see if it's patched and the kind of operating system and settings, and whether or not you have some type of endpoint protection system or MDM running on mobile or whatever, right? So we check the device state, then we compare with the device, with the identity risk and what the user is supposed to have access to based on labels and roles, right? And then you can tie back to the device risk, and then based on the component risk, you whitelist access to resources. So if I'm using a government device, or if I
correct,
use my personal mobile device, I
correct,
don't get the same level of trust. So this is
correct,
not just stuck in time trust,
correct.
right? This is runtime trust, right?
Correct. Runtime trust, and obviously you have the software supply chain projects or software bill of materials. They are on the one hand, coming up well, and you got
Yep.
the CPU vendors, Google, the enclave computing, the trusted,
Right.
So the number of things are coming together quite well. So we try to leverage all of these to make sure that we apply zero trust not in a kind of brute force moronic way, but in a very
Right.
very very practical business way.
But the beauty is that you end up touching all the layers, right? Because that's
Correct.
kind of the issue with many of these products, right? They say they're doing zero trust because they solve, a tenth of a percent, or maybe a tenth of 100%, maybe 10% of the equation,
Correct.
because they focus on one piece of the puzzle. But you don't get to zero trust. Particularly, you can get to zero trust if you have dozens of policy enforcement point that you have
Correct.
to federate and connect
Which is what
somehow.
most organizations are dealing with, right? Most of
Hmm.
so
Yeah. So you had to worry about all this stuff, right? So where are you, I guess, in your journey with
great,
the
great,
product?
great
Because
question.
this
Great
is a
question.
massive lift, right? So
Nick. So as a company, we're a fairly young company. We are about 18, maybe 20 months old. We're working with some two or three classes of companies. We're working with some amazing kind of unicorns. As you can
yep.
imagine, some of the unicorns are not unicorns anymore, but they're still very good.
That's okay.
Very the good cloud native, which means they don't have the
Yep.
legacy of large corporations. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
you can talk YAML to them. So that's one class of customers. Second is large enterprises who are kind of legacy companies, but they think that they want to be as cloud native as a Google or Facebook and Apple, as the case might be. So these are, like I've been amazed at the kind of talent they've been able to attract and retain to get towards, Kubernetes platforms, right? So that's the second class.
Mm-hmm.
Third is, we also need a sort of the MSSP, telco carrier sort of abstraction, who are looking at problems not just as one, but multiple instances where they're delivering this as a service to their customers, right? So that gives you the multi-tenancy and some of the very, the higher level of design and abstraction. So we're working about
Right.
3 or 4 of these in each one of these. And the good news is that we're getting feedback from them almost as a part of our monthly release, and we hope to launch a product by end of the year this year. I'm talking about a commercial product, which will be version 1, which will be licensable, and we'll start sort of monetizing all the hard work we put into it. So the feedback has been fantastic, and I've been amazed at one is the product feedback about, hey, you're giving me all these policies. How do you cluster these policies into logical groups? Or things such as, this is fantastic, this is great, but you know what, the installation, it takes me 3 steps to install it. Can you make it a single command line, right? So everything from sort of the ease of consumption,
one and day 2 process.
Yeah.
And that's kind of, you know, that shows kind of your devotion to quality, right? Because I've been telling you for months maybe that it's good enough to start selling it, but you wanna raise the bar to really make it as good as it can be. And it's
because
it's
the good news, again, good news, bad news, right? The good news is that we have the luxury, we got some amazing investors, right? And the second thing is that once you start monetizing, right,
you can go back. So that's
exactly
it, right? So,
exactly.
Yeah.
I said, why was
and I appreciate that you don't want to sell them like snowflakes, you know. So that
we've seen this movie before, right? You send some good enough software, and then you send a whole bunch of expensive SEs and solution engineers to go fix it on the thing. It's not backward compatible. Then you forklift upgrade, all the things. So we said, it's okay to take a little bit more. Again, obviously, once you're VC investors, when you're a commercial enterprise, you don't have infinite time. We don't have the
no, you don't want to take 20 years. That's not
But the good news is we're around the corner. Every month we're getting feedback, and we're going to be launching a product. We could theoretically launch a product in the next, say, 3 months.
So does that mean like right now, if one of the companies watching the show, want to try to do a POC with your product, they can do it for free?
Go to KubeArmor. Go to KubeArmor. You have join a Slack group, right? If you need any help, obviously, as we often like to say, no salesman will call you. Right? But if you need help, just come. We'll help you out. You go to help.AccuKnox.com, which is a commercial edition. You'll get a full sense of what is going on. There's other amazing, exciting product. I don't even know if I told you, Nick, is the Data Sage, which is our open source data security product, data security, data governance. We've been working with a couple of amazing companies, and in fact, large Wall Street firms want to contribute to it. So that's coming down the pike. So we've got some, KubeArmor, you're up and running. It's great community support. We'd love for you to consume. Love your feedback. If you can do even better, if you can contribute, great. Music to our ears, right? If you need high touch, hand holding support, if you want to sleep well at night, if you want 24/7 support, we're fully there for you, right? So that's certainly available. AccuKnox gives you all the.
I mean, I don't know what organization would not want support, particularly if they're large enough. I mean, I'm talking to so many telcos. Many telcos, people may not know, but are completely moving their backbone to Kubernetes and at the edge and kind of decoupling and doing this multi-tenancy nightmare. And there's a lot of issues with multi-tenancy on Kubernetes. And so I think that's a perfect example of where you need that baked-in security. And I wouldn't see a telco, say, oh, we're gonna get a bunch of open source bits and we don't have a way to contribute back upstream. And if there's a 0 day, we're gonna have to wait for someone to fix it. It's just we're not gonna stick.
Correct, but at least we've done a great job as an industry. I think we've done a great job, and a lot of the credit goes to you, Nick, from what you've done at Air Force. Is the fact that previously it was all commercial first, value later, right? Today it's all about value first, commercial later, which means that try it out, see if you like it. You don't have to spend.
And the beauty is, I'm so pissed when I see, I had so many companies reach out to me and be like, hey, we have this open source project. And I look at it and I'm like, well, you can do single sign-on. You can do all these, enterprise expected features in the free open source project. You need to pay, that fancy license to get really what I would call, expected features in 2022 for any organization of more than 10 employees, right? So it's really kind of a scam, right? It's really a COTS wrapped into a FOSS software. They actually gave it a name. I think it's COSS, commercial open source software. So that's COSS,
Okay.
um, and it's kind of this merger between commercial and open source. I'm like, I'm pretty sure that's just a COTS. At that point, if if you need a license, I'm pretty sure that's just go to the COTS. Because it's kind of misleading, right? Because you can't use it without a
Correct.
license, and
Correct.
so it's just too easy to say, oh, we're special. We're not. The only difference is 90% of the work is open source. Okay, well, there's still 10% that's IP and not commercial license, and that's enough to get you locked in, and it's enough to be a product, and it's when you buy a commercial tool, obviously they already use a ton of open source. You don't ask them, how much of open source you have in your code, right? I mean, who cares? But
Yeah.
there's a lot of glue code, there's a lot of open source code, right? That's kind of what most companies do nowadays, right? They put a bunch
Correct.
of open source products together to create some magical glue code thing, right? So that's fine, but don't mislead people, right? Calling it
Yes.
a cost, that's
Yes.
just anyway. So let's look at why for you, right? I mean, you could have done all of this stuff it's closed source, right? You didn't have to do a lot of that contribution back to open source and CNCF. And why was it so important for you, right, to do that?
Yeah. So the usual reasons are obvious, right? Usual reasons are one, as you started in at Air Force, right? Customers are going away from, hey, you need to talk to a salesperson, you need to talk to an SE, you need to do a demo, you need to do this thing, sign
Mm-hmm.
an NDA, sign a contract before so that you know so that people are
Sign
going
an
away.
NDA before I send you the PowerPoint.
Exactly. So this is
I
all
had that last week. I didn't see it for at least 2-3 years, but I had someone that literally asked me to sign an NDA before sending me a PowerPoint. So
yeah,
like,
it's
wow,
like, wow. Are you
yeah,
still in the
that still
1980s,
exists. That
right?
still
so,
exists.
so the,
2022, but
the world has gone from, hey, value first, right, and then price later.
mhm,
So value is, price is typically a percentage of the value, right? So
right,
and value is not what you tell me, which is the world,
right,
proprietary vendors. Is what I think is the value, right? Which means that
right.
the best way for me to see the value, taste the value, is open source. So that's one, right? So
Yeah,
second is a little bit of kind of California, a little bit a little bit token hippie in a few of us. It's all about all of us consume so much Linux, right? We consume
yep,
MySQL, we consume all of this, right? And we have to give
yep,
something back. It's just good karma, right? That's
right.
right.
Good karma.
And, yeah. And the third, which again we sort of intuitively knew it, but we really didn't experience it until we actually saw it. You also get a very different caliber of technical person. You know what I mean? From a pure
Oh, to
DME,
to
right?
to attract talent, you mean?
Yeah, from a talent. There's
That's a very
clearly
interesting thing because I've been telling, the defense neutral base probably listening to us right now, right? The Lockheed and Northrop of the world, well, not always the best at software. That if they were more open to doing more open source, they would be able to attract better talent because people want to contribute more to open source projects. So you're saying that effectively, but
yes.
by getting involved with open source work, you're able to get better talent higher in the company.
Absolutely. I would go without saying this is worldwide, right? And
Mm-hmm.
obviously, DoD might be interested only in the US talent, but
Yeah, but
worldwide,
that's fine.
across the board, right? What started out as the GNU project at MIT or the BSD project at Berkeley, right? We all knew they were very successful projects which attracted the best and the brightest, right? But that is becoming not just a national phenomenon, but a worldwide phenomenon, right? And
Mm,
so to me, that's great, but we always say as commercial people, how does that translate into value for the customer, right? Value for
right.
the customer is you got an enormous amount of mind share, right? You got
Yep.
brilliant people thinking about it, contributing to it. A single bug in our install document, right, gets flagged within less than a day. I mean, what
Right.
would be
It's more transparency, more yeah, more eyes, right?
yeah. So
Yeah.
at the end of the day, the customer is getting a better product, right? Because community
So it's
support.
interesting, right? Because usually the first one that people mention is kind of the community contribution of other companies jumping into the project. You didn't mention it. Was it something you thought about, or is it not
No,
something you care?
that's also very, very important. Obviously, other people contributing. As I said, this large company.
You're not paying, and that's the beauty, right? It's free. You're not paying for all these developers to come and improve the project,
Yes.
right?
And again, at the end of the day, as sort of business professionals, the benefit is customers discovering, right? You don't have to have expensive salespeople wearing Rolex
No need
watches.
of fancy marketing and ads and
marketing. And all that translates into better commercials for the customer, right? We don't have to charge $1 million for every whatever, right? So
you're certainly not going to ask an NDA to get the PowerPoint deck. That's for sure.
Yeah, and the other thing which I've seen, again, it's been a revelation for me, is that large companies, I'm talking about Fortune 50 companies, right?
Mm-hmm.
They almost have a fast track for open source projects, right?
Yeah.
If
so you see the adoption, like even larger companies, and not just the Google, right? But even like outside of the IT.
I'm talking about old East Coast establishment companies.
They used to hate it. I guess that shifted, right?
That shifted because
they used to be like, oh, that's not good. You can't use open source, right? But now that's it.
Yeah. And large companies are falling behind it, right? You saw IBM, which bought StackRox and said it's all open source, right? So you saw SUSE, which bought New Vector and said it's open source, right? Which means that I think large companies are realizing, producers like us, vendors like us, are realizing that there's redeeming value there. And consumers also seeing that it's a far easier consumption model. It's far more frictionless, right? That's really where we want to go, right? We want to make the customer experience as frictionless as possible, right? And overall, that translates into the more friction you have, right? You got to charge a higher price. You remember the good old days when all of us paid $19.99 to buy 10 shares of IBM, right? Then it became frictionless, then it became cheaper, right? So friction is the economists will tell you that's sort of non-value added sort of transaction cost, right? And that you can, both buyer and seller can partake.
Yeah, at the same time, right, a lot of companies struggle to commercialize open source. You've seen Docker, right? That kind of completely changed the world with the containerization technology. And I would argue is the perfect example of failing to commercialize products just by raising way too much money and not finding the right approach to make money. And so how do you think about kind of that commercialization when you're thinking of costs? Right, there's different models, right? In these tools, it could be a per CPU, per node, per user, per whatever, right? That's often scary to some people because they feel like, oh, the more I use it, the more I pay, and it's kind of scary. But it's kind of also a fair way to think about cost. How do you think about commercialization of the product?
I'll tell you a very interesting anecdote. Martin Mikos, who was the CEO of MySQL many 15 years ago, told me very interesting. The enterprise is comprised of two kinds of people: people with money and no time. That's the CIO, CISO, and people with time and no money. That's your
right.
The open source contributors, right? So the people with time and no money focus on technical value, right? They're the open source consumers. People with money and no time, they're the commercial users, right? Which means that one focus on technical value, the other focus on business value, right? And as long as you have a reasonable way to depict or demonstrate business value, you have a commercial value proposition. If you just stay at the pure bits and bytes, technical level, cuteness, and this thing, right, then it might be hard, as Docker found out, right?
Right.
Even there again, right? MySQL was able to come up with a modestly successful commercial model, right?
Right. But do you think what would be a good example, I guess, of a company that's able to commercialize open source? I mean, most people would mention Red Hat, but I would argue sometimes it's not really. I mean, it's kind of a weird open source.
Elastic is a great example. Snake is a great example. JFrog.
Although Elastic just changed the license to the Elastic license.
I know.
I'm not sure that works anymore. But Snake is a good one, yeah. And these, like you said, StackRox, it was closed source, and now Red Hat open sourced it.
And HashiCorp is another good example, right? HashiCorp.
Yeah.
Those are good examples. I think the good news is that people 10 years ago had to invent models. Today, there's fairly good models. So as long as you don't do kind of Byzantine and strange things, I think you'll be fine.
But do you think the lifespan of company that are around a single open source project are bound to be short because the project is going to be replaced by something else, and so they have to move on to another project? Or how does this work for company?
Definitely. I think we have to sort of expand, broaden. The good news is
So
that
either reinvent yourself or expand or
absolutely. The good news for us is that we have born Kubernetes. We shifted a little bit left when we went into enterprises to support virtual machines and more legacy workloads or brownfield workloads. We started on greenfield, and luckily for us, sometimes you're smart, sometimes you get lucky. Kubernetes going to the edge. It's becoming very natural. So the IoT edge is becoming, Kubernetes going to 5G is becoming very common. So good news is that we're getting really good sort of momentum.
broader engagements.
So it's becoming more durable than. So we're no longer a one-trick pony, if you will, right?
Yeah.
You're right.
You also have a ton of competition, right? I mean, not on this specifically, but as you know, there's a bunch of open source new CNCF project coming out every week.
Correct.
How do we keep up? How do we know which one is going to stick?
I mean, that's where the power of free markets, right? Free markets is all about, hey, I don't mean in a very negative, Darwinian has
No, but that's
negative
most
connotation.
people wouldn't say it negative. That's
No,
the way the capitalism works.
May the best man win, right? Because rather than so
whatever sticks. But as let's say you're on the customer side for a second, right? And you're a CIO, whatever. How do you know which one to pay attention to? Do you weigh do you care about the incubation, CNCF status versus, do you look at that stuff, or you don't care, or what do you care about?
Clearly, obviously, if you graduated, then you've earned your stripes to be a royal player and have a seat at the table, right? If you're incubation, there might be early stage innovation. Then you look at stars, the contributors, you look at the number of downloads, you look at other key metrics. The momentum.
Do you care if a product is only maintained by a single company and there is no other? I always like to see like big CNCF projects managed by more than just like a Red Hat, or my key was often like for some of the key projects was to say, okay, I need to see at least two of the key players, and I would say a Google, a VMware, a Red Hat, a Rancher, a D2IQ, one of these guys, right, has to be Amazon Azure, whatever, right? But one of those has to be at least one, and if you have two, I think it's a winner.
Correct. No, I agree. It really comes from the power of the community. And the good news is that not just this, but large financial companies, large telcos, they're becoming very eager contributors, right? So.
Yeah, and that's a massive market. Most people don't realize how big it's going to be for the cloud native market. They think of them still as kind of legacy players, but they are completely reinventing everything, and with the move to 5G and whatever is going to come next, it's going to be huge. So in fact, that's my next question to you. how do you see all this play in that kind of edge universe?
Clearly, we've got sort of a 12-month roadmap, the 24 and 36, right? The 12-month roadmap is clearly for us here and now, cloud, Kubernetes, supporting obviously the legacy workloads like virtual machines, and we'll be adding a few more modules, right? A few people have said, hey, this is great. You give me runtime, but also can you give me a snapshot of the cloud posture management? Can you give me a quick sort of vulnerability scan dashboards, right? So we'll be adding some of those things. So to make it closer to, I'm sure you've heard the CNAP is emerging as a category. So you'll see us more towards zero trust CNAP, next gen CNAP, if you will, right? So that's sort of where we're going. But obviously, that's a 12, 18-month roadmap. The next phase of growth will come from IoT Edge, and we see very vibrant. We're seeing the Intel, the VMware, the ARM, the Microsoft, IBM, Open Horizon, right? So really putting a lot of muscle. Again, it's not. It might or might not be revenues here and now, but very, very topical. These are very engaging discussions. These are not science experiments, right? Science experiments is what, as commercial company, we have to stay away from, right? So at the same time, At the same time, 5G, right? People think 5G is sort of a pie in the sky, but the private 5G is very real, right? Private 5G
Oh yeah.
is for campuses, campus networks, for this thing, very
Mm-hmm.
real. So we believe that security is a long pole in the tent, and we are very, very comfortable because that really, you want the same level of zero trust, right? Because
Right.
so we think it's a very very durable value proposition we can bring there also.
Yeah, no doubt. And yeah, there's definitely a ton of niche markets, right? I know some companies focused on the smaller footprint devices, like in space and stuff, right? And there's obviously not non-traditional CPU challenges there,
Right.
and many companies now start to support on the open source side and CNCF support non-Intel x86 chips, and that's becoming kind of a thing. So I this is growing faster than I thought. I've seen even companies now on the automotive side, and really start to move to Kubernetes and have the
Yes.
entire car move to that construct. So that's interesting.
I mean, also data, right? Who would have thought Kubernetes started off to deal with ephemeral workloads, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if you've been tracking, Nick, the Doc project, data on
Mm-hmm.
Kubernetes, right?
Yep.
It's getting amazing. This is data on Kubernetes for persistent workloads, right?
Yep.
Who would have thought
I was the first one to push that concept. People thought I was
Wow.
crazy.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize that. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
learn something every day. So,
We want, because we wanted the same cyber enforcement stack, and I didn't want to have a bunch of data things of my cron jewel on the other side of the house, and having everything with the same enforcement and the same visibility and the same
correct.
kind of constructs of orchestration and IAC and GitOps was so important to me that even if I were to lose a little bit of performance or whatever, which is not the case, but even if I would still want it to be orchestrated with the same vigor and the same tech stack. So that's kind of why I pushed it.
Yeah.
People kept saying it's not possible, and I helped all these companies, the Mongo, the Elastic of the world, create their Kubernetes operators, and of
Nice.
course now with Doc, and it's kind of becoming its own almost like a market, right?
Exactly.
So
Exactly. So the good news is that Kubernetes, partly because it's a very well thought out design from Google, uh,
mhm.
and partly because they've done a great job of building a huge community and adoption, and not just that, education, certification, CKA, CKAD, and a broad sort of mega industry around it. So all that's helping the Kubernetes becoming a very sort of very vibrant first class citizen of the enterprise and the edge and data and 5G. And we're solving the last mile problem, which is the security problem, right? And I think that's giving us a very durable, and that coupled with greater awareness of zero trust, which means you got to bring the visibility layer, observability layer, the policy management layer, enforceability layer. And as most people have known by now, that getting to zero trust is just the first challenge. Staying at zero trust is even harder, right? So
Right.
this is not like it's like the Golden
It's
Gate
not
Bridge.
one thing be done.
Painting it once, Golden Gate Bridge is hard enough, right? But you got to keep
Yeah,
on
that's
doing
why I was kind of disappointed when I heard the DoD CIO say that the desire of the department is to get to zero trust by 2029,
it.
which is like, I told them, like, by that is probably going to be something else, so
Exactly.
that probably doesn't work, and the
Minus one
department should be
trust.
leading, but that's just too bad that you would expect something like the DoD with the funding, 700 whatever we got this year. Actually, I think it was plussed up by Congress for 2023 or 4. So I think it's going to be like 773 billion or something like that. And so you would expect that when you have that kind of money. Yeah, it was actually, the 2024 was 813 billion. So we passed to the 8, right? 813 billion a year of taxpayer money. You would think, zero trust would be something that could be achieved, within a year or something. But 2027, 2028, 2029, that's kind of, and we should have started 5 years ago, but so I got a lot of questions from people watching the show on Twitter and stuff, and they all kind of were asking about kind of what you see, and I guess many of these people probably are running companies or running stuff too, but what do you see now with the current market? What about fundraising? What about launching new products? Do you find that the current market to be, are you worried about kind of where the United States is going, maybe in a recession, or at the very least, people will be thinking twice before spending more money?
Those are great questions. Obviously, there are people who are paid way more than me worrying about it and opining about it on Bloomberg TV
Yeah,
and
but
all that.
entrepreneurs feel it, right?
Yeah,
That's
but,
the
but
difference,
luckily, I mean, these are things which you don't want to be caught in a hurricane or a snowstorm and you're least expected. Luckily for us, we are so early in our journey, right? Our valuations are
right?
very reasonable. It's all,
So you
convertible.
don't see this impacting, first of all, like your product launch. But what about if you are doing a round of funding right now? I was all week with a bunch of VCs on the phone, and they're like literally calling me begging for deals. But at the same time, they also say we had deals that were lined up in December and January and February that we had to not close because the valuation is now not aligned with the market, which tells
Yeah,
you like that's a pretty big. And they told me it was not just 20%, but sometimes up to 40%
correct.
lower in what 6 months.
Yeah, I would clearly, if you talk to a kind of pure kind of free market economist, right, he or she will say
Yeah,
all asset classes are correlated, right?
right.
And if you see the hit in the public company markets, right, if you see that they haven't gone down by 50%, they've probably gone down by 25%. Right? Is the
Yeah,
25% haircut a valid one? Obviously, it probably is.
that hurts. That
Yeah,
hurts.
yeah.
That's not
25%,
anecdotal.
so 25% hit, if you look at a Palo Alto, a large company, 25% hit in the public markets should translate into maybe 30-40% hit in the private markets, right? Because private
Right,
markets, you're always projecting into the future, way into the future,
right.
over 5-10 years,
Much
whereas
more risky.
public markets, you're projecting over the next 2 years, right? So that kind of haircut is to be expected because we came from enormous frothy, right? There was level of irrationality where people were
But it
closing
was
rounds.
crazy. I mean, the numbers were insane.
For 4 months, people are closing rounds, right? That, you
On
know,
a napkin. On a
yeah,
napkin.
yeah, and we come from a world where you take money,
Pre-revenue. 10 million, 10 million pre-revenue with a napkin.
yeah, you take money for 18 months, build enough value in 12, 14 months, get your next round, right? That's sort of rationality, right? How can you get 3x valuation in 6 months, right? That doesn't make sense. There's not enough value, even if you had the 100 of the best
Yeah,
Google engineers, you cannot create enough value in 6 months, you know what I mean? To justify
yeah.
a 3x. So
Unless
that
maybe
means,
maybe if you have hundreds of Google engineer, but that might be the exception. I know you can do
yeah,
that.
exactly.
but yeah, I get your point. It's just a matter of timing. It's just physically impossible.
Yeah. I think everybody got caught in this sort of mad rush,
The
right?
bubble? Is it a bubble? What is it? Is it is it
Bubble.
just because VCs just eat, they thrive on each other and there's just are selling this kind of dream, or what are they are
No,
they
no,
controlling?
it's one of those things where, again, it's always easy to blame the VCs or
Well, they
greedy.
they 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 give the money, right? So they define the valuation, right?
Yeah, but or silly entrepreneurs, right? But at the end of the day, right, it all
No one
starts
put a gun
from,
to their head to say, "Hey, give me the money," right?
yeah, it starts from, money being cheap on Wall Street, right? It all starts from
Yeah,
there. The
that's
source of
true.
money is there,
They had
right?
so they had too much money, and then this, but then it, I would still argue that the VCs are ultimately responsible for due diligence and due care of the money spending. So no matter how much money they got, didn't mean they had to just throw it away and just see what sticks, right? It's. I mean,
Yeah,
I get it was cheap and easy money, but still, it's just
correct. And also they play the portfolio game. The portfolio game is, hey, if 1 in 10 turns
one
out to
out of
be
10.
Google, you're fine, right? That it
Yeah,
washes away a lot of sins. Whereas
all the
us,
loss. Yep.
us entrepreneurs, we got a very concentrated
We
portfolio.
can't we can't have one of 10. That wouldn't be very good for us. I don't
Exactly.
think that.
So
Nobody
we've
will
got to
be
be a
very
lot more.
happy.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, seasoned entrepreneurs understand that raising money is only the first step in a long journey, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, at the end of the day, if you raise 1x, you better be in a position to give 5 to 10x back. Otherwise, you should not, right? So Just raising money.
There's so many people that I told them, I said, would you do it? Would you do it with your own money if you had the money, right?
Yeah.
And like, oh no, that's too much risk. I'm like, so you're asking others to do it, and actually the same people, right? Early stage, pre-revenue, taking massive amount of salaries as the founders, and I'm like, wow, so you really have no skin in the game, right? You're just an employee, right? It's just mind-boggling to me.
Correct. And it also creates a lot of ills, right? You buy random Google keywords. You throw a big sort of cocktail party at RSA, right? Then you forget, hey, what am I doing this for, right?
Yeah.
Am I trying to impress my customer? No customer is going to get impressed. Real customer.
That's ego stuff. It doesn't even stick. No one cares.
Get a free meal. You know what I mean? Customer is going to impress you with them a good product, right?
Right. and bring tangible value, right?
Yeah, and you make yourself available in the nice, good, decent hospitality suite at outside of RSA or Black Hat, right? Those are meaningful ones. But just throwing a wild bash party really doesn't really help anybody, right? That's what happens when you raise money at some ungodly valuation. You hire random people, hire random marketing people. You do things which don't add value to the customer. So in that sense, we've learned a lot from Jeff Bezos at Amazon, right? We all come from a world of being customer centric, but he made that a religion. You know what I mean? So very impressive.
No doubt. And so if you were to talk to an entrepreneur tomorrow, would you tell him it's not the right time to start a business, or would you tell him go ahead anyway?
It's a great time to start a business. The good news is that
just be nimble and don't sell out of your
Right? This is still living in Silicon Valley. I'm sure like you're pre-plugged into the tech ecosystem, bunch of entrepreneurs approach you, bunch of VCs send you business plans to take a look at. Yeah, some of them are flaky. Some of them could be sort of refined and reimagined, if you will. But a lot of them are very, very meaningful businesses, right? Are they worth $10 million, $20 million, $100 million pre-money valuation? That you can. That the good news that the new normal, a new sheriff in town, who's sort of saying that.
I can tell you the guy that I've worked with a lot, and the guy that probably is kind of the best at really getting to the real valuation of companies is probably Mr. Wonderful, from Shark Tank. Is Mr. O'Leary is just he knows his stuff. He's people like him or don't like him, I don't care, but just like me. But I think it's at the end of the day, he just knows his stuff, and he is pragmatic about it, and he knows the value, and that's the thing too for entrepreneurs to know, right? Raising a seed round at a crazy valuation is not good for you for your next round if you don't meet your targets, and then you're gonna have a down round. It's gonna be a disaster, right? You don't want to do that.
And also you create some psychopathic behavior within the organization,
just toxic stuff
you hire 4 VPs to do nothing.
The stress.
Right? You hire a whole bunch of people. You hire the chief kitchen officer. You do these kinds of things.
Right. You start buying a bunch of stuff, and you raise too much. It's like it's kind of the problem of DoD, right? I always tell people, right? Funny enough, the budget of software, right, is 60 billion minimum, right? Space Force, Air Force, and then you compare, that's the French defense budget is 50 billion, with 10 billion less than what we spend in software, right? but yet it's just like, okay, but we know we waste a lot of it, so you have too much and you just waste too much, it kind of create this wasteful behavior, right? Did we lose you? Or did we lose me? We lost you. All right, I think he froze. But that was the last question we have. But I had to let him give us the thank you and the closing argument. So let's wait to see if he's gonna be able to come back and maybe China is targeting his connection again. So let's give it a minute. But I wanted to point to you guys, of course, that who is going to be on the next episode. So let me bring that up. We're gonna have a pretty unique episode next week. First, you're gonna have great people joining. It's not gonna be just one. It's gonna be 6 people joining us. We're gonna have a pretty unique episode to talk about embedded system with 6 of the most world leading expert of embedded software. And so we have 2 people coming from the Air Force, 2 people coming from Wind River, a person coming from Tangram, Flex, and NSYS. And so we're going to be talking about the challenges that we face when we build embedded software, decoupling software and hardware, enabling reuse of code, and become more modular and flexible, and how do you interface with the legacy systems. We're gonna talk about how this implementation is happening in the DoD, and also how does this compare to what a SpaceX is doing on a daily basis, and kind of compare the velocity of work, and how we get to be able to move at the pace of relevance. So we're gonna have like I said, 6 people. And since I always tell you to invest an hour a day to learn, next week on Tuesday, I think there's going to be a lot of great discussions, particularly if you're dealing with hardware and software, and you want to find out how to effectively be able to run your software across different type of hardware, what kind of emulation you could do. It ties back to modeling and simulation, and the ability to create potentially a digital twin. So all these concepts are pretty game changing and really enabling teams to build a capability. And so certainly recommend you join us next Tuesday, the 28th at 1 p.m. But we have Nat that's back. He told me his laptop crashed, so that's another good example that even the biggest
I'm extremely sorry. It never happened probably in the
and Yale's
12 months. It happened to me just once with my Mac, right?
Yeah,
sorry about
but that's always me. I create bugs. Yeah, I'm very good at it. I always find CVEs. So we talk about the challenges. The last thing we wanted to have you give us is your parting thoughts. Wanna every time when we do a show, we let the guests kind of share their final thoughts. So it's over to you for that.
Thank you very much, Nick. First and foremost, thank you. Thank all the attendees, right? Today, we're all dealing with huge demands on our time. There are multiple demands on our time. So really appreciate you making time. Sincerely appreciate it. Time is the only asset which is very, very hard to replace very easily. So thank you. Second is that, if you want to, like most things, you listen to something for an hour, 90 minutes, and you probably forget 99% of what you heard, right? A few parting thoughts I want you to walk away from is zero trust is very real. Operationalizing zero trust is a challenge, and that's a problem we solve. Kubernetes is here to stay. There's a reason Google's cost of compute is probably 1/10 of anybody else. Is because I'd certainly say that Kubernetes and all the operational practices around that, which they've mastered, is a very, very key part of it. Security in Kubernetes is a non-trivial challenge, but not just us, the whole community is solving it very, very well. Third is open source is a very, very, again, Nick knows it better than most of us. He pioneered it. It is a great way for you to get value, demonstrate value to your colleagues before you ask for budgets and resources. So we certainly want to make it very, very easy for you to do that. Last but not least, there's a fully supported commercial enterprise edition of Zero Trust, Kubernetes, runtime security, full stack CNAP, which we're working on, which we'll make available to you. And last but not least, Kubernetes is just one element in a very exciting technical roadmap. You don't have to be a geek to really appreciate the fact that Kubernetes is going to data, Kubernetes is going to IoT edge, Kubernetes is going to 5G. Really, it's a very exciting journey. So as either a technologies practitioner, right, is a great way for you to get comfortable with Kubernetes as a technology, as an orchestration platform, for you to empower your businesses, users with it. And be assured that as a zero trust security vendor, we're fully behind it. We've got a great product. Go to kubearmor.io and try it out. We'd love for you to give us comments, participate, give us feedback, join our Slack channel. If you like it, tell other people about it. If you want to blog about it, that's great. If you want to contribute it, even better. If you want support or beyond, that's even better. So we are here, very excited about it. Would like to thank Nick and the entire attendees for partaking and giving us your precious time. And hopefully it's been worthwhile for you. And stay safe, stay healthy. The economy has some challenges, as Nick and I discussed, but always, as any one of us have been through a few of these, the strong come out stronger. So I'm fully confident that we as an industry will come out stronger. The strong vendors will come out stronger out of this. So I'm very excited about it. Great to have you. Thanks for your time.
Well, thank you so much for the last word, and thanks everybody for joining. We'll see you next Tuesday in the next episode of In the Nick of Time with the embedded system team to talk about decoupling hardware and software. It's going to be a very interesting discussion on how they ran all this digital transformation and the digital twin emulation to different embedded systems, space systems, weapons, rockets, ships, and so on. So it's going to be a lot of fun. So join us next week, Tuesday, 1 p.m. Eastern, and stay healthy and keep pushing and making sure that our kids have a fighting chance at winning against China 20 years from now. Thanks so much.
Thank you.